Welcome to Coding with Tom. Today we're going to be adding a new section to our restaurant detail. This section will have the images from dishes of the restaurant. We're going to be getting these images from our service and downloading them. We're going to be showing a placeholder during the download, and then we're going to be caching these images locally so that we don't need to download them a second time. We will begin by adding the images to our model. You will see that the API that we have already has this running. So you will see here that now a restaurant will have an array of images, and then we will add them to our URL. That array of images will contain the name that we will append to a URL, a public URL in our restaurant API, where we can get the different images. So the first thing we gotta do is change our model. Let's start by creating our image cache service. So we're going to be requesting an image to this cache. In case it doesn't have it, then it will download it, store it, and pass it on to us. And this is our image cache service. So as soon as it is initiated, it tries to create the image directory in case it's the first time that the app is being run. I'm gonna make this a singleton since I don't want multiple classes trying to create the same directory. And then here we have, well, this is, as I showed you in the browser, this is the domain of the images we're going to retrieve. Then we'll have our own queue to download so we don't block the main queue. And we also have our directory where we're going to be storing the images. To get the directories where you can write data in your device, it's just asking the file manager.default. It's also a singleton. And you ask it for the URLs. In this case, I'm getting the URLs for the caches directory in the user domain mask. And you get the first URL from that path. Then I'm just appending the images name, which is the name of the directory that we created here. Then this is the method for getting the image. So first we're trying to see, before trying to download the image, we're gonna see if it's already stored. So we get the URL and we retrieve it from the image cache. Again, here for the cache, we're creating a local URL with our images directory and we append the name of the image. Then we try to see if the data exists. The class data already has a method that searches that URL. And if we get something, then we return the image. And that's what we're using here. So if we have the image cache, then we return the completion handler with that image. If not, then we start the download of that image. For that, we create the URL with the domain that we have. And again, data can query contents of the web. So we pass in that URL. If we get data back, then we first store the image and then we pass it. What I'm doing here is simulating that we're downloading an image. So that's why I'm creating a random dispatch queue, and I am adding a async after. This simulates the delay, and we return that image. So it will seem as if there will be a slight delay when we'll be downloading the image so we can see it. And now that we have our cache service, we can go on to the scenes and show the image. What we're doing here is we're going to add a UI segmented control. This one we'll use it to toggle between the ratings and the images of the restaurant. And the images of the restaurant will just be another collection view. Okay, and here we're going to create a new default data source. And we're going to configure this new collection view. But before that, let's create our image collection view. So since for that one, I need to create the view model that we're going to be using for the data source. First, the view model. As usual, it's going to be hashable since we need it for the data source. And it's going to have the image URL, which we're going to get for our own restaurant. Then we need a placeholder. And the placeholder is in our assets. We add it here. So this is the placeholder that we're going to show while it downloads the image. and then it's gonna have the image loading closure. We're not gonna be downloading images in the views. Views need to be kept clean. So for that, we're just gonna be passing a closure that receives another closure. So basically what this class is going to, what this ViewModel is going to have is a closure that the image collection can call that will trigger the download that was configured by someone else, and then it can react to whatever it's going to be returned. For this to be hashable, we need to configure this to equatable since closures don't conform to that. We're going to use the image URL to compare them. And then we need to, again, because image, the closure don't conform to hashable, we need to conform to it ourselves. And there we go, we're ready. Okay, this is our image collection view. So we are doing, well, the same thing. We create a custom key for our view model, and then we configure the view with it. Our view ourselves is just going to be an image view, and that's it. It takes up all of the space. It's going to scale the image to fill the entire content. We're going to click to bounce in case the aspect ratio of the image is not the same of the image view when it scales it up. In case, because we don't know when the cell will be reused, we're taking some precautions. The first one is if we're reusing the cell for the same image, then we're not going to do anything. And we're going to check that with the image URL of the view model, and we're going to store that image URL in a variable. Then when we load the image, we're going to call the closure that I was telling you about. So we're going to call a closure that downloads the images. Again, because the download takes time, this cell can be reused for another image. So we're going to take the precaution again. We're going to check that the image URL is still the one that we were downloading. And we are going to check that we get an image back. And in that case, if we get an image back, then that's what we're going to be placing. While all of this happens, we are going to use the placeholder image during the download. And that's what we should see. And now that we have our cell, we're ready to configure the view controller. This is our collection view. We're just creating a UI view composition and layout. We're going to have 2 images per row. So that's what the fractional width is less than half. We're going to have an item size, an item, and then a group size. The group is just going to be horizontal. And that's where we have fractional width 1 and fractional width height, actually. And then we have an intergroup spacing of 8 just so the rows are not stick to one another. Also because they're not going to be the entire width, we need to add here to the group spacing between items, and I'm going to add a flexible, and since we have different sizes of phones, I'm just going to add a 0, and because it's flexible, then it's going to expand. And to update our data source, we need the view model to give us the images view model. And for that, we do need to make some changes, and we need to add our new service. This is the loader that we're gonna be passing to each one of the images. So if you see, I'm passing a completion handler, and the parameter is another completion handler, and that's the one that we're gonna pass to the image cache service. And that's pretty much it. Let's try running. Images seem a little bit big. Oh yeah, the group cannot be that big. Let's try again. We'll see here that views were loaded instantly. That was because in our previous run we downloaded this one. Now let's see with this that has different images, and you will see how this still has the placeholder, and then it changes to the image. Next time we go here, that won't happen. Now, as a bonus and a correction of the previous one, we're getting some layout constraint here because of how we are configuring this. So let's modify this rating cell. Now, the exceptions are because we're using here a text view to display the comment. That's not necessary. We can use a UI label. And we are free from exceptions. And here we have our images. As you can see, they were cached, even if I was doing a different run, so they're not stored in memory, they are not being stored on device. And that was all for today. Downloading images is pretty simple. You just need to use File Manager to get the URL for the directory that you're looking for in the user's device. You can safely store anything that are using data, and it's not very complicated. You're just passing a URL, be it local or web. For the images, we use UI compositional layout, which we're already familiar with. We just need to specify the fractional width of the items, and then let the collection view lay out the items without us having to do anything else. Hope you liked it. Bye.